Hi there, Facebook. I'm back from last night. This is very different circumstances. No more Dez in Dallas. I'm about to unleash my final thoughts, but quick cameo from our quote-unquote daughter, Hazel, as you join us slowly but surely. This is our year and 4-month-old Maltese, Hazel. My wife, Ernestine, and I. She's right here. Hi, Ernestine. Hi, Hazel. Hi. Hi, how are you? Thank you. Thank you. How are you doing? She's a little down right now. No more Dez. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Ernestine. And thank you, Dez Bryant, for all that you did for my Dallas Cowboys. So, just got back from the gym. I decided just to keep my same clothes on. I'm wearing black. I thought it would be the perfect colors to mourn the passing of one Dez Bryant. Ran into some guys in the gym, big fans of Undisputed. Sometimes they're fans of mine. They were not fans of my opinion that Dez had to go. They were already in mourning because they love them some Dez Bryant. These are long-time, die-hard Dallas Cowboy fans who often wear their Cowboy paraphernalia to the gym I work out in. And they just couldn't believe he's gone. So I tried to explain to them, and I will again explain to you, man, I love Dez Bryant. Nobody got more into the 2014 Dallas Cowboys than I did, especially into number 88, especially into throw up the X, because Dez caught it. But that was about the last thing he caught for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm talking about the Green Bay playoff game, obviously. That was a catch. You know it. I know it. I've run into hundreds, thousands of fans around the country who throw up the X and say that was a catch. And that summer, after one of the all-time great years that Dez Bryant had, as the Cowboys made the playoffs, beat Detroit at home, should have beaten Green Bay because that was a catch. At Green Bay, I think they would have beaten Seattle at Seattle because they'd done it that regular season, as you recall, and they would have gone on to that Super Bowl. And that summer, as you know, Dez Bryant exploded. He was on the cover of Rolling Stone. He became a Rock Nation client under the great Jay-Z and company. And you want to talk about crossover popularity? Dez Bryant became the most popular Dallas Cowboy. I think he eclipsed Tony Romo. I just believe that. I could be wrong, but that's just my gut feeling. Dez cut through and crossed over. And he was my favorite Cowboy because I never was quite able to wrap my arm around Tony Romo. Tony, when you needed him most, he'd be there for you least. But Dez always seemed to be there. And obviously, Tony Romo had a wavelength, a soul connection with Dez, just a deep click with Dez. And when in doubt, Tony Romo just flung it toward 88. High, long. Remember that the play in Green Bay was 4th and 2. He just heaved it up the sideline. Sam Shields defending. That was a catch. How many times did we see Dez just rise up over 2 DBs, 3 DBs, and snatch it out of the sky? That was the Dez I knew and loved. Was he a little full of himself? Yeah. Did he have his off-field issues occasionally? Yeah, he did. But he was a star. He was box office. And Jerry Jones loved him some Dez because Dez sold the Dallas Cowboys like nobody did. He was the next Michael Irvin. In some ways, he was even more exciting and explosive than Michael Irvin was. And I'm the biggest, as you know, Michael Irvin fan. I still think he's the greatest receiver ever, but that's just me. Conversation for another day. Dez would occasionally drive me a little crazy. There was the one throw at the end of the the Giants game. I'm going back 4 or 5 years where he needed to get his toes down in the back of the end zone to win the game. The great Drew Pearson, the original 88 for Dallas, criticized him publicly for that. So did I. I often worried that Dez didn't apply himself, didn't dedicate himself enough in the offseason, but he was just so gifted. And I was so into Dallas taking him into that draft. That was the Tebow draft. Because I watched him so much at Oklahoma State, Stillwater. I heard all the stories about his mom was awfully close to the program as far as showing up at every practice, and was mom going to be a problem in Dallas? And I said, I don't care. I'll take him because not only can he rise and snatch, he can return kicks, return kickoffs and punts at Oklahoma State, but really punts. He had escapability, man. And he returned punts his first couple of years in Dallas. And he just pretty much took over the league in 2014. And there were many conversations and debates on television about Dez Bryant being the best receiver in the NFL. I forget who was in the conversation. I guess Megatron still was at that point, but Julio definitely was. Dez. I was all for Dez. And then it started to happen in 2015. Dez's body began to betray him. It began to break down, and I don't have time to go through the litany of injuries. He had everything. Everything went wrong. And he had the Jones, so to speak, fracture, speaking of Jerry Jones. And 2015, he was in and out of the lineup. He tried to come back. He probably tried to rush back. And he never, ever looked like Dez Bryant. In 2015, as you recall, was just a nightmare of no Romo. And Brandon Whedon and Matt Castle and Darren McFadden and no Dez. And no Dez and no Dez and a little Dez and no Dez and a little Dez, a flash, a tease, and no Dez. And I thought, surely he will bounce back. And you know the rest of the story. It just got worse and worse and worse. And last year was truly the most agonizing year, I said this before on another Facebook Live, that I've ever gone through as a Dallas Cowboy fan. And I started when I was 10 years old. I think it was the 61 Dallas Cowboys I went to see. It was the then St. Louis Cardinals at the old Cotton Bowl. And I can hear Hazel. Her mom just left and she's howling in agony over the loss of her mom, at least briefly. I think she just came to the door. Hang on just 1 second. Hazel, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. She's coming right back. Dez is not coming right back. So last year just tore me apart because it was clear from the start that Dez just was no longer Dez. Body had broken down. Shell of self. And as my partner on Undisputed, Shannon Sharpe, always says, and remember, Shannon is, Hazel, no. Go on. You're okay. You're okay. It's okay. My partner on Undisputed, Shannon Sharpe, Hall of Fame with 3 Super Bowl rings, has just been all over Dez because he runs 2 routes. He's so predictable. And with the Romo rapport, wavelength, he could just go up over DBs because he was healthy enough. And Romo just had that knack of just saying here and sort of, I'm not even sure he threw him open. He just threw him jump balls because he trusted Dez and Dez trusted Romo. And they just had one of those clicks that sometimes you just have that Dak and Dez never had. Nothing remote. But the point was, and the problem was from the start, that, Hazel, come on. It's okay. Come on. Hang on, I got to get Hazel back. There we go. Sorry to interrupt. The problem was that last year, Dez was a physical shell of himself because he lost a step. Then he lost his confidence. He tried too hard. He had no sync with Dak. And yet Dak is more by the book than Tony Romo ever was. And Dak reads the defense. Dak goes through his progressions. And again last year, his progressions told him, the defense screamed at him, you need to throw it to 88 because 88 was often single covered. So Dak dutifully would go to 88. He threw Dez Bryant last year. 1/4 of the passes he threw went to Dez. And only 52% of those passes were caught. That's horrendously bad. Dez Bryant led the league in drops. I never saw him separate. I watched, as you guys know, I watched like crazy close. I'm all over it. He could not separate. He could not, hang on. I'm having trouble with Hazel here. He could not gain an inch of separation, or he couldn't fight for the football anymore because if it were thrown in his catch radius, he just couldn't catch it. He fought the ball as he was fighting himself. And it was the classic case of the fading superstar who's facing his football mortality as his body is defying him. And he's just fighting harder and harder because it's not there anymore. Well, after the Denver debacle, remember that? God. It was just so bad because the first pass hits him in the hands, and Chris Harris Jr. Just hits him in the hands, and he goes the other way. And then remember the last play. I have no idea what route Dez was running because Dak has no idea what route Dez was running. And I can just go on and on. The Seattle game, remember, it's a 16-14 game in the third quarter, and they're driving. They're down to maybe Seattle 23. And on that play, Dez actually ran out of the slot, which is where he should have been last year, the whole year, just trying to get open out of the slot. And remember, he's running into the zone, and Dak thinks he's going to sit in the hole in the zone. And Dez, not a student of the game, just keeps drifting. And Dak throws where he thinks he's going to sit. And, of course, the ball hits Dez in one hand and pops up in the air, and KJ Wright grabs it and goes the other way. It was a huge turning point in a game that they eventually, obviously, lost. So, by Seattle, I'm just out. Because the whole issue becomes he's slated to make almost $13 million next year. And remember, I just so you get this, I campaigned for Dez to get the contract after 2014. I was beating the drum for it. Jerry, pay him, pay him, pay him. I was on ESPN at that point. We were at the ESPYs, I believe, because it was in July, just ahead of training camp. And I just campaigned on the air that day on ESPN. You got to pay him, Jerry. It's D-Day. It's Dez Day. Give him his dollars. He earned them because he did. And to Jerry's credit, he paid him, what was it, 5 years, $70 million, $35 million, guaranteed. He earned every penny of that, but you have to keep earning it. So next year he's slated to make $13-ish million. And it's not like you can ask Dez Bryant, hey, big fella, take a pay cut. Come back. We'll be fine if you play for $4 million next year. Help me out here. Dez Bryant would get happy with that. Dez Bryant would swallow his considerable pride and say, sure, Jerry. Sure, Jason Garrett. Sure, Dak Prescott. I'm good with making only $4 million when I was slated to make 13, when I was supposed to make 13, when I'd earned, I thought, 13. And now you're saying I'm the number 3 receiver? Really? And you're going to cut my balls per game back by 3 or 4? Some games I won't get any. Really? Do you really believe Dez Bryant would be happy with that? There's no way. Dez Bryant is proud to the core. Dez Bryant is volatile. And he would have been unhappy. He would have gone into his shell occasionally. He would have made waves. That's just what he does. And so finally, thankfully, Jerry Jones saw the light and just said, I can't do this. I have now been campaigning since the year ended. For those who watch Undisputed, 9:30 to noon Eastern, Fox Sports 1, I have been campaigning since the end of this act, before the season ended. You just got to cut bait. You got to cut ties. You got to let him go, Jerry. He's one of Jerry's all-time favorite players, and Jerry released a big statement today to that end. just a handful of players he's been that close to. Dez will always be part of the Cowboy family, and he will be. But finally, I'm assuming Stephen Jones and various other assistant coaches finally talked Jerry into coming to his senses. Emotions aside, Jerry, family ties aside, he's a liability. No player wrecked this past football season more than Dez Bryant did. No player wrecked it. I mean, wrecked it. He was the number one culprit in why a Cowboy team that I thought had Super Bowl potential fell to 9-7. It was mostly because of Dez. I'm not heaping the sole blame on. Obviously, there was no Zeke for 6 games and no Sean Lee for 6 games, and the offensive line underachieved, to put it mildly. And Dak struggled down the stretch without the same pieces around him. But Dak had no receiver who could get open, especially his quote-unquote number one receiver, Dez Bryant. None. Nobody. Jason Witten can get open, but he can't run after catch. Cole Beasley was getting doubled because mostly by the last 6, 7, 8 games of the year, Dez was getting single coverage. The great Dez Bryant. Nobody's afraid of him. He can't run by anybody, and he can't separate from anybody. He runs 2 routes. One used to be a back shoulder fade jump ball route. No good at that anymore. So the last I saw of the Dez Bryant I used to know and love was in the Green Bay playoff game of the end of last year, the one at Jerry World. And boy, Dak was great, and a lot of the comeback passes went to 88. And I thought, okay, here we go. And then last season happened, and it tears me up because I like Dez personally. Dez has tweeted at me many times, thinks that I've turned on him and whatever. I hate him. I'm trying to destroy his poor soul, or I don't know what he was tweeting yesterday. He just went off on a Twitter. It wasn't just a rant. It was a Twitter book. And it scared me because you could just see right before your very eyes the unraveling of a former star facing his football mortality. And he's angry, and he's frustrated, and he's shell-shocked, and he just doesn't know what's happening to him. And I think that Dez ranting on Twitter yesterday just couldn't come to grips with, couldn't make himself believe that he was going to Jerry's office first thing Friday morning to get cut. I think he thought they'd have a conversation. Jerry would pat him on the head, as he always has. You're going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine. Let's go get him next year. That's what Dez fully expected yesterday to hear. And instead, boy, I'd like to have been a fly on that wall, because that would be one of the tougher conversations Jerry Jones has ever had to put himself through as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. Instead, it was, Dez, I love you, but we got to go a new direction. And I'm sure Jerry sold him on, you need a change of scenery too. We all need to start fresh here. And Dez does. Dez needs to grow up now as he approaches age 30. He does. And this, Dez, if you're listening, watching, trust me on this. You'll look back at this moment. I know you've already gone on Twitter and gone off on the Cowboys about now it's personal. Now you got your edge back. Okay, great. I get it. Where was your edge last year? That's fine. And again, you needed this. You need to be forced to move out of the state of Texas. You just do. You grew up in Lufkin. You went up to Stillwater, Oklahoma State. It's kind of like Texas North, because I grew up in Oklahoma City, which was always a wannabe Dallas, kind of a littler Dallas Junior, if you will. And it's Texas-y. All the way up to Stillwater, it's Texas-y. So Dez never really left home. And then he became, what a dream job. What a dream draft that was, to wind up Dez does Dallas. Wow. And so he's been spoiled rotten by the city that idolizes its professional football team in ways no other city does. I've been there and done that. I lived there for, 17 years, wrote 3 books on the Cowboys. I've lived in many other cities, from Los Angeles, where I am now, covered the Rams here, covered the 49ers in San Francisco, lived in New York, lived in Connecticut, lived in Chicago and covered the Bears. I know what it is. Nothing compares to the idolatry, the hero worship that Cowboys experience in Dallas. And who was the biggest Cowboy over the last, 7, 8 years? You can say Romo. I say it was Dez. Just on pure aura, mystique, star power, it was Dez Bryant. And it just spoiled him rotten, because I don't think it made him work very hard. It didn't make him work harder, that's for sure. I don't know how dedicated he was, because it all came so easily and so naturally for him. Great. He was just great. He was great when he was in high school, great at Oklahoma State, and he was great for about 5 years in Dallas, 5.5, 6 maybe. And it's time to move on for everybody. The decks had to get cleared. This was make or break. Trust me on this. Jerry had to pull this plug, or next year's team was doomed, because Dez would have dragged this team back down to 9-7 next year. He would be a constant, as Stephen Jones said, distraction. He would drain the energy of the huddle, of Dak Prescott, and now everything changes. Dez needs to go. I like Baltimore would be great, because Ozzie Newsome and company, they're an older team. They like to add later in their career veterans. Steve Smith. I've been looking at Eric Decker, and obviously they added Crabtree, so he'd be a good fit there. He'd be a good Raven. They play with edge. The whole organization has edge. We've got the great Ray Lewis on Undisputed, as you saw all week. He sort of set the edge, if you will, in Baltimore. And that's what Dez needs to pick up, and have to go live on the East Coast for a while. Get the feel of it. Have to rise and shine, live up, and reprove himself, be re-challenged. This will be great for him, and it's great for the Dallas Cowboys. And you say, as the guys asked me in the gym about an hour ago, and now what? The security guard, Derek, come in at 4 o'clock in the morning at Fox every morning. He is a Cowboy nut. Most of the security guards, believe it or not, at the Fox lot here in Los Angeles are Dallas Cowboy diehards. Go figure. So I walked in this morning, and Derek kind of hung his head. He said, well, it's D-Day, Dez Day. We all knew Dez going in to see Jerry. He said, what do you think? And I said, all I know is, I've been saying this again. He knew exactly what I've been saying. I said, Jerry has to cut him today. And Derek dropped his head further, and he said, I just can't stand the thought of it. I can't even imagine the Cowboys without Dez Bryant. I said, it has to happen. They'll be better off without him. And he looked up and said, and they're going to add who? Who's going to replace Dez Bryant? I don't know, and I don't care. There's not much there to replace. It's more important to get rid of that instead of replace that. Obviously, they went out and got their bargain basement deals. They got Allen Hurns and Deontay Thompson. They can run a little bit. Do I love either? I do not love either one of them. Allen Hurns had that one blip year in Jacksonville, and he got paid. And in the last 2 years, his total production didn't add up together to equal or eclipse what happened 3 years ago. So it looked like he was a one-hit wonder, and Jacksonville just dumped him. So do I? No. Deontay Thompson can run, but he's on his 5th team now. I don't know. Sanjay Lal, the new receiver coach, he's saying, I'm going to fix Dez. Dez and I can go places together. Baloney. Who are you, Sanjay Lal? I went off on Undisputed about that. So I can't tell you that so-and-so will replace him. Now, I was a big Bryce Butler fan. We had him lately. It's been a month or so, 6 weeks ago, on Undisputed. I keep in touch with him. And I said all last year, he's better. He was better last year than Dez Bryant, but because they're paying Dez so much, as Bryce kept saying, follow the money, they're paying him so much, they wouldn't even let Bryce in the game. What happened when Bryce got in the game at Arizona? You remember that game? That was a turning point. It looked like they had saved the season after the Denver debacle. Remember the Monday night game at Arizona? Dak threw 2 passes to Bryce Butler, rollout passes that went for
One was just a huge gain. One was for a touchdown. Huge gains because Bryce Butler can run, man. And he's like, what's Bryce, 6'3", 215-ish? Not quite Dez's physicality, but he's a big kid who can run, and now he's an Arizona Cardinal. So I don't know. He kind of ripped Dez on Undisputed. I'm sure Jerry took that personally and didn't like it that Bryce was taking shots at the coaching staff for not playing him. Okay, fine. So they said, cut bait. Maybe they just didn't believe enough in Bryce Butler at that price. And reportedly, they made a big run at Sammy Watkins. Now, that was a big ticket run because he got $48 million for 3 years to sign with Kansas City, and it just got too rich for their salary cap blood. But the good news was they tried. And the good news was off that, which I just learned 2 weeks ago, was that's when I said, that's it. Jerry's going to cut him. And I was right. Because there's no way you go after Sammy Watkins if you haven't made the decision to cut Dez Bryant. So now it comes down to the draft. Can you draft a kid who will step in and be 2014 Dez? No. I doubt. I hope so, but I doubt it. I don't love this group of receivers, but I do like some of them. I'm not going to say I love them. And I don't love Calvin Ridley. And I know he's the first, in all the mocks to go. I just don't love him. He's too little, and he's not explosive enough. He's not sudden enough. I don't see it. I just don't see it. I don't get him. And I'm just hoping he goes earlier than Dallas picks. I'm not going to go love, but I do really like DJ Moore. I watched Maryland a number of times last year, especially against Texas early in the year in a shootout. He jumped off my TV screen. He is productive because he can get behind people and get open and make big catches. I like him. I watched James Washington, Mason Rudolph throwing to him for Oklahoma State. That'd be interesting if you replace Oklahoma State with Oklahoma State. And again, I'm not saying I love James Washington, but he's got some weird gear. He just gets behind people, and I don't really get it because he doesn't time fast. He just plays fast. Would I be fine with him, especially in the second round? Sure I would. And then Eric Dickerson, the Hall of Famer on Undisputed Today, brought it up because I brought him up many times. Cortland Sutton, Southern Methodist University, alma mater of one Eric Dickerson, back in the Pony Express days with Craig James. I covered those teams, but now there's a receiver by the name of Cortland Sutton, and he's a big kid with a big catch radius. And he can run. He's not a blazer, but he can run. Eric said he was 6'4". I thought his combine measure, I forgot to look this up before I started here on Facebook Live, so forgive me, but I thought he was more like 6'3", 218-ish maybe. Not quite as big as Dez, but I watched one game of SMU, and I liked him. I saw flashes of what could be brilliance, but he looks like he's more project type. It's going to take a while, and the new receiver coach, Sanjay Lal, ran his workout, Cowboy receiver coach, as he ran Calvin Ridley's workout, and Lal was raving about him, how coachable he is, and how much he taught him in the workout, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, I can roll with that. You might want to get two of these kids because they need fresh blood. They need Dak Prescott to be spreading the wealth because that's what he does best. If he can get 6 or 8 receivers involved in the offense, they are better. He got so Dez dependent that it was so destructive last year. He's waiting for Dez to come open. Dez is the read, but he's not there because he can't separate and he can't run by anybody anymore, and nobody is afraid of him. No DB has much respect left for Dez Bryant except that he can compete. That's all he can do is compete, and he did lose his edge last year along with his confidence. I didn't even see a competitor in him last year. So some of these kids, a couple of them, it's just once you spread things out and get Cole Beasley open from the slot where he got doubled repeatedly last year and get little Ryan Switzer, maybe try double slot attack occasionally, get both of them, bing, bing, bing underneath. It's sort of a Amendola-Edelman combo going. There are other ways to skin this cat. Skin a redskin, skin an eagle, skin a giant.
There are other ways to let Dak operate a more versatile attack where everybody's involved, as well as flipping the ball occasionally and obviously handing it to Ezekiel Elliott. There are other ways to go where you're not Dez dependent anymore. He's he's such a force. He's such a presence. He has such a big personality in the locker room, on the sideline, throwing tantrums, or in the huddle throwing fits about, you got to throw me the ball. Or dropping balls and dropping your team's psyche, your team's momentum. Every time he dropped a pass, it's like he dropped their very core, their nature, the whole team confidence fell on the carpet when Dez dropped it, because once upon a time, he was the go-to game-changing receiver and no more. If Dez had a 2014 ability year last year, a health year, if we could have turned back the clock to 2014, honestly, I think the Cowboys make the playoffs. Honestly, I do. Even with losing Zeke for the 6 games and losing Sean Lee for the 6 games, it's just... It takes, it just sucks the energy out of the team when he drops so many big balls, especially on third down, that he used to just snatch and put in his back pocket. I'm sorry. I love him, but I'm so happy they cleared the air and cleared the decks and let the ball get spread to other receivers. Figure it out. Obviously, there'll be more of a run-based team if Zeke can stay eligible and healthy next year. And obviously, they're going to run more read option. I just screamed for it last year, and now they're saying they're going to make the offense more Dak-friendly. He needs to carry the football off the read option. He needs to play a little Tebow ball occasionally, because he's, as you know, Dak, you want to talk about strapping, he's 6'2", 250, and he can take some punishment, and he can run and slide and get down after 8 yards. You saw the run he made. I didn't love him somersaulting in the end zone at Arizona, but he can do more of that. They can spread it out because Dez is out. So I wish him well. It was tearing me up to read those tweets yesterday, because it was just... like Dez kept saying, this is sad, about how the media is tearing him down. No, Dez, what was sad was you unraveling before our very eyes on Twitter. What was sad was you, the fading star, trying to come to grips with his football mortality, because it's fading. It's like, I'm going to go way off here, but I'm a big fan of old movies. It's like, for those old movie lovers, there are probably 2 out there right now watching. It's like Sunset Boulevard. Remember Norma Desmond, the fading Hollywood star? And she's just flipped out, and she comes down the staircase and says, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, as in Cecil B. DeMille, the director, the great director, and she's just lost it because she thinks she's still about to shoot a close-up scene in some big movie, and she's just this washed-up old hag. And I'm not saying Dez is washed up, because he's not, but I couldn't help but flash on Norma Desmond yesterday, because I've seen Dez on Twitter just come apart and just be this tortured soul who's saying, I am so effing unbothered by all this, when he just bothered the hell out of him. He was just tearing his guts out to have to do this before our very eyes. So this is good for Dez. New challenge, new day, new opportunity. I don't know where it'll be. Again, Baltimore makes sense to me. We'll see what Ozzie does. He's not going to make much money. And new day for the Dallas Cowboys. With Dez, no shot next year. Without Dez, big shot. Still a really good football team. I love this team. I think Philly's going to have problems next year. Philly's got a quarterback quandary unlike any I've ever seen, because their quote-unquote backup just played 2 of the best playoff games in the history of quarterbacking, in the NFC Championship game and as the MVP of the Super Bowl. Nick Foles. So he's going back to the bench, really? And Carson Wentz, who's never played a single down of playoff football, you're going to go forward? Really? I don't love Carson Wentz. I don't buy completely into Carson Wentz. I know they were making a big case, Shannon Sharpe was, for MVP last year. Yeah, what? Well, let's just see. And Philly made a lot of moves, but they added some volatile
big Dez-like personalities, starting with Michael Bennett, along with LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi. I don't know. Sometimes when you think it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. So I give the Cowboys, in a bounce-back year, a great shot next year. Got to see what they do in the draft. Maybe there's still a free agent move to be made. Now they got some money to play with. All I know is that a day of mourning, because I'm going to miss Dez, but I don't miss this Dez. I miss the 2014 Dez. A day of mourning will turn a little later into a day of sunshine because there's a new ray of hope. This had to happen. Thank you, Jerry Jones, for having the guts. Wasn't easy, but thank you, Steven, for talking your dad into finally closing his eyes and saying, no more Dez. Had to happen. It's going to be great that it happened. Hurts me to say that, but it's true. Thanks for watching Facebook. I will see you Monday morning on Undisputed, 9:30 to noon Eastern Time on Fox Sports 1, and we will be going at it over the playoff games this weekend. Spurs Golden State, which is noon Pacific Time tomorrow, and LeBron versus a very dangerous Indiana team. I believe that one is 12:30 Pacific Time, 3:30 Eastern on Sunday. Can't wait. See you, Facebook.